I'm Nora Camden, 19 years old, and the night candles flickered across our dining room like tiny spotlights on a stage I didn't ask to be on. My mother, Elaine, kept smoothing the table runner as if neat corners could steady her shaking hands. My stepfather, Gerald, watched me with the cool patience of a referee waiting to blow a whistle. My friends tried to laugh at nothing, their eyes sliding to me and away again. When Gerald pushed his chair back, the scrape of wood on tile cut through the last bit of birthday music like a blade. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and tap that follow if you've ever had to hold your head high when someone tried to make you small. I grew up in a small Ohio suburb where weekends meant church potlucks, hand-me-down coats, and neighbors who always waved from their porches, and for a long time I believed kindness was a kind of currency that would get you through most doors. Mom worked double shifts at a clinic, taught me to say please and thank you, and to return every borrowed thing cleaner than I found it. When she married Gerald, the house got quieter even as it got nicer. His rules were like pictures hung in straight lines. Nothing crooked, nothing loud, everything just so. I learned to move carefully, to keep my shoes by the door and my thoughts to myself, because in his world order replaced warmth and silence, passed for peace. Still, I held on to the simple values Mom gave me. Help the person next to you, tell the truth. Even if your voice shakes, and never leave a mess, you can clean up. By the time I hit my senior year, I balanced a cashier job at the grocery store with community college classes, counting tips and coupons, and saving for bus fare while the girls from the nicer part of town compared tailgate plans. I wasn't jealous. I just felt like our streets were different maps printed from the same city, and my roads always took the long way. Tessa, my best friend since 4th grade, never made me feel small. She brought thrifted dresses and bad cartoons, and the kind of laughter that lets you breathe. Uncle Mark showed up with birthday cards that had more ink than money, and each one said, "You matter, kiddo," like a promise made face to face. Those small anchors kept me steady on days when Gerald's voice clipped me down to size with a single sigh. He liked to talk about responsibility, about how a person proves their worth by not needing anything, and he held himself like a man who kept the score. I could tell you every lesson I learned in his house without raising my voice. Don't ask twice. Don't leave a plate in the sink. Don't expect praise for doing what should have been done already. But there were also the soft rooms Mom made in the corners of our life, late-night grilled cheese after my shift, a hand on my shoulder before an exam, the quiet note on the counter that read, "Proud of you." I lived between those two climates, one that froze and one that thawed, and I tried to build something honest in the middle. On good days, I thought I was getting there. When my birthday came around, the table was set with a sheet cake and paper plates, and Gerald's crystal tumblers stood next to plastic forks, like a joke I wasn't supposed to notice. Mom kept her smile in place, but it wobbled at the edges the way a bridge dips when a truck rumbles over it. Tessa squeezed my hand under the table, and I pretended the gesture meant we were just nervous about the candles, and not about the man who could turn a compliment into a courtroom. I looked at the door and imagined a different kind of evening, one where a father's voice wrapped the room in velvet, where the gifts were not things, but time and care, and the kind of pride you don't have to earn. I told myself to be grateful for what there was. A cake, a few friends, a song nobody quite finished. The first cut of conflict is always quieter than the moment it breaks open. It's the breath someone takes before they speak, the way a hand rests on the back of a chair like a warning. I felt it traveling the table, even as the frosting smudged my knife and the room tried to pretend we were all just celebrating. Gerald cleared his throat and fixed his cufflink, and in that small movement, I heard the speech before he gave it. Mom's fingers laced together as if she could hold the night still with both hands. Tessa's smile went thin, and the candlelight quivered across the silverware like it already knew the air was about to change. I wish I could tell you that a good memory stepped forward and held the line that a joke turned his mood, that a birthday candle did what wishes are supposed to do, but the truth is simpler than that. In our house, the moment right before things went wrong always looked exactly like this. Polite controlled a shape drawn in pencil that someone was about to cut along. I sat up straighter and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear so I wouldn't fidget, keeping my face even the way I'd practiced in mirrors. The room had the hush of a theater when the lights dim and the curtain starts to lift. Gerald rose to his feet, slid his chair back in a measured line, and set his hand on the wood as if claiming the floor. Gerald stood at the head of the table, one hand gripping the back of his chair. The laughter died so fast, it left a hollow ring in the air. The candles burned low, flickering against the polished silverware, their glow trembling like the pulse under my skin. I could see the reflection of his face in the dining room mirror behind him, his mouth a tight line, his eyes cold and sure. He looked down the table, straight through me, and in that moment I knew whatever he was about to say wouldn't be forgotten. "Nora," he said, his tone flat as a gavel, "you're not my daughter. You never have been." The words landed heavy and clean, cutting through the room. My fork slipped from my hand and hit the plate with a clatter that made everyone flinch. For a heartbeat, nobody breathed. Then Gerald's chair screeched back another inch as he straightened his shoulders. "You're grown now," he continued, his voice even, like he'd rehearsed it. "You're 19. That means tonight you leave this house." Mom's hands flew to her lap. Her knuckles turned white around the napkin she'd been twisting for the past 5 minutes. "Gerald, please," she whispered, her voice small, pleading. "Not tonight. Not like this." He turned his head toward her slowly, his jaw flexing. "Elaine," he said, his tone sharp enough to slice through the tablecloth. "She's been living off us long enough. I've done my part. It ends tonight." My throat burned as I looked at my mother. Her eyes darted between us, full of tears she didn't dare let fall. I wanted her to say something, anything to tell him to stop. But her lips just trembled. Gerald reached down beside his chair and lifted a crumpled grocery bag from the floor. My chest tightened as he tossed it at my feet. Inside, I saw my clothes folded in the careless way you pack things you never plan to see again. "There," he said, brushing his hands together as if he'd finished some small chore. "That's all you need." The silence that followed was unbearable. Tessa shifted in her seat, her hand half raising like she wanted to say something, but I caught her eye and shook my head. My friends, the ones who'd come to celebrate, sat frozen. No one moved. No one wanted to be pulled into the wreckage. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The sting in my eyes turned hot, but I swallowed hard and forced my voice steady. "If you want me gone," I said quietly, "I'll go." Tessa pushed her chair back, her face pale. "Nora, wait. You don't have to." "Don't," I whispered, cutting her off. My voice cracked at the edge. "Just don't." Gerald's lip curled, and I could see the satisfaction flicker across his face. "Do yourself a favor," he said, his voice lowering to a cold hum. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Mom finally stood, her chair legs scraping against the tile. "Gerald," she pleaded again, but softer this time, like she already knew it was useless. "She has nowhere to go." He didn't even look at her. "She'll figure it out," he said. "She always does. This is how you learn." I bent down, picked up the bag, and straightened slowly. My hands shook, but I held my chin high. "You're right," I said, each word cutting through the lump in my throat. "I will figure it out." For a moment our eyes met. I could see the triumph in his small mien, satisfied. Then I turned away because I wouldn't let him see the tears threatening to spill. My mother's sob caught in the air, soft and strangled, but she didn't move to stop me. I walked to the front door, every step echoing through the silence behind me. My hand brushed the frame as I paused, waiting for something, a word, a sound, a sign that someone still cared enough to ask me to stay. None came. When I opened the door, the night air hit me like a slap. Rain had started to fall, just a fine mist, at first the kind that looks harmless until it soaks through your clothes. I stepped outside the screen door, creaking shut behind me, and by the time I reached the end of the walkway, the mist had turned into a downpour. Water streamed through my hair, my shoes filling with cold, dirty rain. The plastic bag sagged under the weight, cutting into my fingers. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The glow from the windows blurred behind me until it was just a patch of yellow in a sea of gray. My chest ached, but I kept walking. Each drop of rain felt like it was carving something new into me, something raw and sharp. The storm picked up as I turned down the street, thunder rolling somewhere far off. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stop. I tried to breathe, but the air felt too thick, the cold too deep, Every step sounded like the echo of a door closing behind me. My thoughts ran wild flashes of every birthday, every quiet night at the dinner table, every time Gerald's disapproval filled the room like smoke. I remembered being 10, standing on a stool to wash dishes, my hands stinging in hot water as he barked, "You think I'm your maid? Clean it up. You're not my responsibility." I remembered Mom standing in the hallway whispering, "Just let it go, Nora. Don't make him mad." I had learned young that silence was survival, but silence was heavier now, pressing on my chest until I could barely breathe. The rain turned my dress into a second skin, clinging cold and heavy. I stumbled once, my foot slipping in a puddle, and caught myself against a stop sign. My breath came in shudders. A car passed, spraying water across my legs. Its headlights disappeared into the rain, leaving me alone again in the sound of my own footsteps. My fingers were numb from gripping the bag, and my hair clung to my face, dripping into my mouth when I tried to speak. I wanted to curse, to cry, to scream, but my voice had been trained too long to stay quiet. The road curved ahead, lined with streetlights, blurred by rain. I wrapped my arms around myself and kept moving. The night smelled of wet asphalt and distant wood smoke. Somewhere a dog barked, then silence. The storm drowned everything else. I thought about calling Uncle Mark, but my phone was still on the kitchen counter where I'd left it charging. I pictured the red case beside the half-melted candles, another forgotten thing at that table. Even if I had it, I didn't know what I'd say. He lived 2 towns over and wouldn't hear his phone this late. My vision blurred as tears mixed with rain. I tried not to think about the faces I'd left behind, the way Tessa had looked at me, the way my mother's shoulders had collapsed. The truth was, she had chosen not to fight, and that silence hurt worse than any word Gerald had spoken. I walked past the old gas station at the corner, its neon sign flickering through the storm. The parking lot shimmered with puddles that mirrored the dim light. I paused under the awning, breathless, my bag sagging at my side. My hands trembled as I wiped the water from my eyes, but it didn't matter. The rain found me anyway. "Where do I go now?" I whispered, though there was no one to answer. The sound vanished into the wind. For a long moment I stood there, the rain drumming against the metal roof above me, the street empty in every direction. Then, just as I took another shaky step forward, a low hum cut through the storm. Headlights bloomed in the darkness, growing brighter as they approached. A sleek black car slowed to a crawl beside the curb. My grip on the bag tightened. The window rolled down with a smooth mechanical hiss, and a man's voice carried over the rain. "Are you Nora Camden?" he asked. His tone was calm, almost careful. My heart thudded so hard I could barely hear myself answer. "Yes," I said, my voice rough from the cold. The man nodded once, the faint light catching the edge of his face, dark hair slicked with rain, eyes steady. "Your father sent me," he said. For a moment the world seemed to stop. The rain, the street, the ache in my chest, all of it went quiet. I just stared at him, not sure I'd heard right. "My father," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned a little closer, his words deliberate. "Daniel Hart. He's been searching for you." I froze, my pulse roaring in my ears. My real father's name hung in the air like a spark waiting to catch. Behind me, the storm kept falling, relentless and cold. Ahead of me, the car idled softly, its open door like a question I wasn't ready to answer. And for the first time that night, I stopped walking. The man behind the wheel didn't move when I hesitated. Rain hit the hood of the car in steady sheets, each drop echoing against the metal like a drumbeat. The open window let out a faint stream of warm air, the scent of leather mixing with the damp night. I gripped the handles of the plastic bag tighter, my fingers aching from the cold. My voice was barely there when I asked, "You said my father sent you?" "Yes," he replied, his tone even. "Daniel Hart. He's been trying to find you for years." For a moment, the name didn't sound real. I had heard it once long ago when my mother thought I was asleep. I remembered her whispering it softly like a secret she wasn't supposed to say. "Daniel," she'd murmured into the dark, her voice breaking before she went quiet again. I took a small step back, water splashing around my shoes. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" I asked. He nodded as if he expected the question. "That's fair," he said, reaching toward the passenger seat. From there, he lifted a small envelope, its edges damp from the rain that had blown through the window. "He wanted me to give you this." The paper trembled in my hands when I took it. The envelope felt heavier than it should, like it carried more than just words. I slid my finger under the flap, careful not to tear it. Inside was a folded letter and a photograph. The photo stopped me first. A man with dark hair and strong eyes held a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket. His smile looked unshakable proud in a way that pierced straight through me. The baby in his arms was me. "He never forgot you," the man said quietly. "He's been waiting for the day he could reach you." The words blurred as my tears mixed with the rain. My voice wavered. "Why now? Why tonight?" "Because tonight you're free," he said. "Your stepfather had legal guardianship until you turned 18. That ended hours ago. Your father wanted to come for you the moment he could." Lightning flashed behind him, casting the car's outline in white for a split second before darkness fell again. My pulse hammered in my ears. All those years I had believed my father had left, had chosen not to be part of my life. My mother never said otherwise. Whenever I'd asked, she would look down and tell me, "It's complicated, Nora. You don't need to think about that." I stared at the photograph again, tracing the man's smile with my thumb. Something inside me shifted. Part disbelief, part fragile hope. "If this is real," I said, my voice catching, "then why didn't he come sooner? Why didn't he fight?" The man's jaw tightened. "He did," he said. "But Gerald made sure he couldn't reach you. Your father tried everything, calls letters, lawyers. Gerald intercepted it all. You were stolen from him, not abandoned." The word "stolen" felt foreign, too big to hold. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. "You expect me to believe that I expect you to see the truth," he said simply. "He asked me to find you tonight so you wouldn't spend another hour thinking you were alone." I didn't know how long I stood there, soaked through, staring at the photograph. My thoughts were scattered, bouncing between disbelief and the faintest glimmer of something I hadn't felt in years, belonging. The rain poured harder, drumming against the roof of the car. Finally, I looked up at him. "What's your name, Caleb?" he answered. "Caleb Rhodes." "Caleb." I repeated the name, catching in my throat. "If I go with you, where are we going?" "To see your father," he said. "He's waiting for you." The world around me seemed to tilt, the night pressing close and heavy. Behind me, the house I'd just left sat dark at the end of the block, its windows glowing faintly. Inside, I knew Gerald was probably sitting at the same table, maybe pouring himself a drink, satisfied that I was gone. Mom would be quiet beside him, pretending she couldn't hear the rain. I looked back toward the car, its headlights cutting through the storm like two steady eyes. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I took a deep breath and whispered, "Take me to him." Caleb gave a short nod and reached over to open the passenger door. Warm air hit me the moment I climbed in. The leather seat hugged the chill from my skin, and for the first time all night, I felt something close to safety. The road stretched out ahead of us, wet and glistening under the storm. The windshield wipers moved in a steady rhythm, sweeping the rain aside in quick arcs. I pressed the photograph to my chest, afraid that if I let go, the moment would vanish. Neither of us spoke for a while. The hum of the engine filled the silence, soft and constant. Every now and then, Caleb would glance at me in the rearview mirror, his expression calm but guarded, like he knew how fragile this night was. After a few miles, I found my voice again. "What's he like?" I asked quietly. Caleb smiled faintly, keeping his eyes on the road. "He's kind," he said. "The kind of man who keeps promises even when it costs him. He's never stopped looking for you." I turned toward the window. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Streetlights passed in blurred streaks, each one reflecting off the wet pavement like melted gold. "He really thought I was gone. He thought you were out of reach," Caleb said. But he never stopped hoping. He said the day you turned 18 would be the day everything changed. My eyes burned again, but this time the tears didn't fall. They just sat there, heavy and quiet. I thought of every night I'd lain awake, wondering why I wasn't enough for Gerald, why Mom didn't stand up for me. I thought of birthdays that came and went without a word from the man in that photograph. And now I was being told he'd never stop trying. The car turned onto a narrower road, lined with tall trees. Their branches bowed low from the rain dripping over the windshield as we passed beneath them. After a few minutes, a faint glow appeared in the distance, a house with light in its windows, warm against the dark. My chest tightened. Caleb slowed as we pulled into a long gravel driveway. The sound of the tires crunching against stone echoed softly under the car. When he parked, I stared at the front door for a long time. My hands were still shaking, the letter still clutched in my lap. Caleb turned off the engine. "He's inside," he said quietly. "Take your time." I nodded, unable to find my voice. The rain had stopped completely, leaving only the soft drip of water from the trees. I opened the door and stepped out. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. My shoes sank slightly into the gravel as I made my way up the path. When the porch light flicked on, my heart jumped. The door opened slowly, and a man stood there, his figure framed by the glow inside. His hair was streaked with gray, his face older than in the photo, but his eyes, those eyes were the same. He froze when he saw me, his hand gripping the doorframe. "Nora," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Hearing my name in his voice made my knees weak. "You're real," I managed to say. He stepped forward, his expression breaking open with something I hadn't seen directed at me in years, pure love. "I am," he said, "and I've been waiting for you every single day of your life." The air left my lungs in one sharp breath. The plastic bag slipped from my hand, landing softly on the porch. Before I could stop myself, I moved forward and he caught me in his arms. The warmth of his embrace broke through the cold that had followed me since I left that house. He held me tight, his voice rough as he whispered, "You were never unwanted. You were stolen from me. But you are mine, Nora. You always were." I buried my face against his shoulder, the photograph still in my hand, the letter pressed between us. The porch light flickered slightly as the night settled around us, the storm finally quiet. Behind me, Caleb closed the car door with a gentle thud, giving us space. I didn't turn back. For the first time in years, I didn't have to. When my father finally pulled back, he cupped my face in his hands and looked at me as if trying to memorize every line. "You're home," he said softly. The word home hung in the air, fragile and real, and standing there in the soft glow of that porch, I finally believed him. The house smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, a scent that clung to the walls like something that had lived there for years. My father led me inside, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, as if he still couldn't believe I was real. The living room was warm, lined with bookshelves and family photos, some of him fishing, some of places I didn't recognize. None of them showed me yet. Somehow the space already felt like it had been waiting for me. He gestured toward the sofa near the fireplace. "You must be freezing," he said. "Sit down. I'll get you a blanket." His voice had the roughness of someone who'd been quiet for too long. I nodded and sank into the couch. My wet clothes clung to my skin, and the heat from the fire made steam rise from the edges of my sleeves. When he came back, he draped a heavy wool blanket around my shoulders. It smelled faintly of pine soap and smoke. "I still can't believe you're here," he said softly, "after all these years." I stared into the fire, the crackle and pop filling the silence between us. "I didn't even know you were alive," I said quietly. He sat across from me, elbows on his knees. "I know," he said, his voice breaking. That's what he wanted. My chest tightened. "Gerald." He nodded. "He did everything to keep me away. I tried Nora, I called, I wrote, I even went to the house once when you were little. He threatened to have me arrested. He told your mother he'd ruin her career if I ever came near." His words came slowly, each one weighed down with memory. "I went to court, but the judge sided with him. He said I'd signed away my rights. I never did. I think your mother was scared, and she signed papers she didn't understand." The sound of the fire filled the long pause that followed. I rubbed the edge of the blanket between my fingers, feeling the rough weave. "She never told me any of that," I said. "Whenever I asked about you, she'd just say it was complicated." He leaned forward, his hands clasped. "She was trying to survive, I think, but that doesn't make it right. You should have known the truth." I looked up at him. His eyes blue like mine were rimmed with exhaustion, but behind it there was something steady. Hope, maybe, or relief. So all this time, I stopped, the words catching in my throat. "You were looking for me." "Every day," he said. "You never stopped being my daughter. I kept a picture of you on my desk. I told anyone who'd listen that someday I'd find you." His hand trembled as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small locket. He opened it carefully and turned it toward me. Inside was a tiny photo me at maybe 2 years old, chubby cheeks, holding a stuffed bear. I touched the locket gently. "I don't even remember this picture." "You gave me that bear the last time I saw you," he said, smiling faintly. "You dropped it when your mom carried you to the car. I kept it in the trunk for years. I couldn't throw it away." The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting lines that hadn't been there in the photograph. His voice softened. "When Caleb called tonight and said he found you, I couldn't breathe. I've been waiting for this moment for 18 years. I swallowed hard. "He said you'd been preparing for it." He nodded. "Every year I wrote you a letter on your birthday. I kept them all, thinking one day I'd give them to you." He stood across the room and returned with a small wooden box. It looked handmade, the grain smooth and dark. He set it gently on the table between us. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside were envelopes neatly stacked, each one labeled with a year in careful handwriting. The first said, "Happy first birthday." The last, "Happy 18th." My breath caught. I picked up the top envelope and ran my thumb over the ink. The corners were soft, worn from being handled. "You wrote me every year I did," he said. "Even when I didn't know where you were, even when I wasn't sure if you'd ever see them." I opened the first one. The handwriting was firm but warm. "You turned one today. You tried to grab my nose when I leaned in for a kiss. You laughed so hard you hiccuped. I can still hear it." I pressed my lips together, tears blurring the words. The next one spoke of her first day of school, the next of a birthday. He missed each line, carrying a father's love through years of silence. By the time I reached the fourth letter, the words were swimming on the page. I set it down and wiped my cheeks. "You remembered everything." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Every day without you was a day I didn't stop fighting," he said. "Gerald might have taken time from me, but he didn't take my love for you." The fire crackled louder, filling the quiet that settled between us. The warmth of the room wrapped around me, soft and steady. But something else was rising too. A slow, deep anger I hadn't felt before. I thought of Gerald's cold stare, his smirk, as he threw the bag at my feet. I thought of all the years I believed I was unworthy, unwanted. I stood and walked to the window, the reflection of the fire glowing faintly in the glass. "He lied to me," I said, my voice low. "He made me believe my father didn't want me." My father's voice came from behind me, calm but heavy. "That was his greatest lie. He built his power on it. But now you know better." I turned back toward him. "I can't just forget what he did." He shook his head slowly. "You don't have to forget. You just don't have to carry it anymore." The words settled into me like a slow breath. I let the silence stretch before I spoke again. "Mom knew," I said quietly. She didn't stop him. His expression softened. I think she was afraid of him. He controlled everything, her money, her work, even what she could say. Fear can twist a person until they don't recognize themselves. I didn't answer. My hands were still trembling, but not from the cold. I walked back to the couch, picked up one of the letters, and held it against my chest. "I spent so long thinking no one wanted me," I said. He came to stand beside me. "You were never unwanted," he said, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. "You were hidden, but not forgotten." I looked up at him. Then the weight of years pressing down and lifting all at once. The firelight danced in his eyes, and for the first time I could see myself reflected there, not as a burden, but as something cherished. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The sound of dripping leaves came through the window, soft and steady. My father looked toward the door, then back at me. "You don't ever have to go back there," he said. "Not unless you choose to." I sat down again, clutching the letter. "I don't know what happens next," I admitted. "You don't need to know," he said. "For tonight, you rest. Tomorrow we'll figure it out together." The fire crackled as he turned down the lamp beside us. Shadows shifted across the room, gentle and deep. I leaned back, the warmth of the blanket wrapping around me, the sound of the fire like a heartbeat in the quiet. For the first time in years, my body felt still. The house, the light, even the air, It all felt like an answer to a question I'd been asking my whole life. Somewhere beyond the window the night stretched wide and dark, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I looked at my father one last time before my eyes grew heavy. "Thank you," I whispered. He smiled, his voice barely above a murmur. "Welcome home, Nora." The last thing I heard before sleep took me was the soft sound of the fire, steady and alive, carrying me into a morning that finally belonged to me. When I woke the next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, soft and golden against the quilt pulled over me. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The room smelled faintly of pine and something warm, bacon maybe, or toast. Then I saw the stack of letters on the nightstand and remembered everything. My father's house was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't feel heavy. The floorboards creaked as I walked to the kitchen, drawn by the scent of breakfast. He stood by the stove, still in a flannel shirt, turning eggs, with the kind of care that made simple things look deliberate. He looked up when he saw me and smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Morning, sweetheart," he said. "Sleep all right?" I nodded, sliding into a chair at the table. I did. It's been a long time since I've slept through the night. He placed a plate in front of me, warm and full, then sat across the table with his own. "I thought we'd start the day with a full stomach," he said lightly, then added, "There's a lot I want to show you later if you're up for it." I looked around the kitchen, the shelves lined with mismatched mugs and old family photos. It felt lived and real in a way I hadn't known a home could. "I'm up for it," I said, and meant it. After breakfast, he led me down a hallway lined with framed photographs. Each one told a piece of the life I'd missed, trips to the lake, family gatherings, people I didn't recognize but wanted to. He stopped by one photo in particular, a younger version of him standing beside a woman holding a baby. My breath caught. "That's me," I whispered. He nodded. "Your mother took that picture the day before she left. I didn't know it existed until years later. Someone from the hospital sent it to me." I studied the photo, tracing the edges of it with my eyes. Mom's face was younger, softer, her smile real. For the first time, I wondered what she must have been like before Gerald. Before all of it. We spent most of the day talking. He told me about the house, how he'd bought it after I was born, because he thought it would be a place to raise a family. He showed me the garden out back where roses climbed the fence despite the autumn chill. Every story was a glimpse into a life that could have been mine. By the afternoon, we sat outside on the porch sipping tea while the air cooled. The leaves were turning small flecks of orange, catching in the breeze. I held one of his letters in my lap, the one marked for my 10th birthday. The paper was thin, the ink slightly faded, but his words still carried weight. "No matter where you are, I'm with you." I folded it carefully, sliding it back into the envelope. "I wish I'd known," I said. He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I wish you had too." He paused, then added quietly, "I want to tell you something I never told anyone else. When your mother left, she didn't plan to cut me out. She was scared. Gerald convinced her it was the only way to keep you safe. I think she believed him." I looked down at my hands, unsure what to say. The anger that had been simmering in me softened, replaced by something quieter. Grief, maybe. "Do you think she loved me?" He turned to me. Then his expression gentle. "Yes, I think she did. She just didn't know how to fight him. But that's not your burden anymore, Nora." The way he said my name felt grounding. I breathed in the scent of rain still clinging to the air from the night before. "I want to stop carrying it," I said. He smiled faintly. "Then start by letting yourself belong here." Later that evening, we sat by the fireplace again. The same box of letters rested on the table between us. He picked up the last envelope, the one marked Happy 18th Birthday, and handed it to me. "I never mailed this," he said. "I was saving it for the day I'd finally see you again." My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, the handwriting was steadier than in the earlier letters. "If you're reading this, it means you're old enough to know the truth. You are not defined by the people who failed to protect you. You are defined by your own strength. I will always be waiting for you, no matter how long it takes." Tears blurred the ink before I finished reading. I set the letter down and looked at him, my voice shaking. "You really never gave up on me." "Not for a single day," he said. I didn't know how to answer, so I reached across the table and took his hand. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The fire popped softly. the warmth filling the quiet between us. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "I want to see her." He looked surprised. "Your mother?" I nodded. "I need to hear her side. I need to know why she let it happen." He hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "If that's what you want, I'll support it. But promise me something, whatever she says, don't let it shake what you've learned tonight. The truth isn't always kind." "I promise," I said. He squeezed my hand once before letting go. "I'll help you find the right way to talk to her. But for now, you should rest. Tomorrow's going to be a big day." I stood and walked toward the staircase, pausing halfway up. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for finding me, for everything." He smiled, the firelight soft against his face. "It wasn't luck that brought us here, Nora. It was time." Upstairs, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The rain had returned, tapping lightly against the windows. I thought about the years that had been stolen, about the girl who used to wonder if she'd ever be wanted. Somewhere deep inside, I felt that part of me loosening its grip. I turned toward the nightstand, the letters stacked neatly beside me. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, low and steady, but it didn't sound like the storms I used to fear. It sounded like something ending, making room for something new. Tomorrow, I would face the woman who'd stayed silent while my world fell apart. But tonight, I finally knew I wasn't alone. The morning I decided to see my mother, the air felt heavy, the kind that holds the chill of rain even after the clouds clear. I stood by the window with a mug of coffee, staring out at the long driveway that led away from my father's house. The world outside looked washed clean, but inside me, everything still felt tangled. My father joined me, his hand resting gently on the back of my chair. "You don't have to do this today," he said quietly. "There's no rush." I shook my head. "If I wait, I might never do it." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Then I'll drive you." The ride into town was silent except for the sound of tires over wet pavement. Every mile felt heavier than the last. I kept my hands folded in my lap, watching the trees slide by through the window, their branches bare and silver in the pale morning light. When we reached the edge of the neighborhood, I'd grown up and my heart clenched. The streets were the same cracked sidewalks, same worn fences, but it all looked smaller somehow. My father parked a block away from the house. I sat there for a moment, staring at the familiar porch steps. "I'll wait here," he said softly. "Take all the time you need." I nodded and stepped out. The wind carried the faint scent of damp leaves and something faintly sweet Mom's gardenias. The bushes still lined the porch, though they were trimmed short now. I walked up slowly, every step echoing the sound of my heartbeat. When I knocked, it took a while for the door to open. Mom stood there in a robe, her hair pulled back, her face pale like she hadn't slept. For a second, neither of us spoke. Her eyes darted over my shoulder, as if expecting Gerald to appear. "Nora," she said finally, her voice thin. "Hi, Mom." My voice trembled more than I wanted it to. She opened the door a little wider. "Come in," she whispered. The house looked almost identical to how I'd left it. The dining table was still set against the far wall. The rug still had that faint stain from when I spilled juice years ago. But something about it felt colder now, like the air hadn't moved in months. She gestured toward the couch. "Do you want tea?" "No," I said softly. "I just wanted to talk." She nodded, wringing her hands. I figured. For a long time we sat in silence. She looked at the floor, then at her hands, never at me for long. I waited, hoping she'd speak first, but when she didn't, I took a slow breath. "Why didn't you stop him?" Her head jerked up. "Nora, it wasn't that simple." "Yes, it was," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "He humiliated me. He made me feel like I was nothing, and you just stood there." Tears welled in her eyes. "I wanted to protect you." "By doing nothing." The words came out before I could soften them. She flinched. "You don't understand what he was capable of," she said, her voice breaking. "He controlled everything. The money, my job, even what I said to you. If I fought him, he would have taken you away completely." I looked around the room, the walls closing in with the weight of her excuses. "He already did," I said quietly. "You just let him." She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I'm so sorry, Nora. I thought I was keeping peace. I thought if I could just wait him out, things would change. I felt a knot forming in my throat, one that had been there for years but never had words. "He told me my father didn't want me," I said. "He said I was a burden, that you both regretted having me. I believed him." Her head lifted, her face streaked with tears. "That was never true," she said quickly. "I was scared to tell you about Daniel because I knew what Gerald would do if he found out. I thought silence would protect you." "It didn't," I said, my voice trembling. "It broke me." She pressed a hand to her mouth, sobbing quietly. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall filled the room. Then she whispered, "He's gone, Nora. Gerald left a few days after you did. He packed a bag and never came back." I blinked, stunned. "He left." She nodded. "I think he realized there was nothing left to control once you were gone. The house is in my name now. It's quiet here. Too quiet." The words hung there strange and hollow. I thought I'd feel relief hearing he was gone, but instead, all I felt was the weight of everything he'd left behind. Mom looked at me, her voice softer now. "You're with your father, aren't you?" I nodded. "He found me." Something shifted in her expression. Sadness, but also a kind of relief. "Good," she said. "He deserved that chance." I swallowed hard, the air thick in my throat. "He told me what happened, about how you were forced to sign papers, about how he fought for me." Her eyes closed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "He tried to tell me once that he could protect us both. But Gerald was clever. He made sure every door closed before I could reach it." She looked at me, her voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll understand that I was just afraid. I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was tired." "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said. "Not yet." She nodded slowly. "That's fair." We sat in silence again, the air between us heavy but honest for the first time. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the gardenias by the window. When I finally stood, she rose with me. "Will I see you again?" she asked. "I don't know," I said truthfully. "Maybe." At the door, I paused and looked back at her. She looked smaller somehow, standing in that doorway with the morning light falling across her face. "I did love you," she said quietly, even when I didn't know how to show it. I nodded, my throat tightening. "I know," I said softly. Outside, the air felt different, cooler, lighter. My father was waiting in the car, engine running. When I climbed in, he didn't say a word. He just glanced at me, his eyes steady, and started driving. The road stretched out ahead, winding between trees that glowed faintly gold in the afternoon light. I rested my head against the window, the tension slowly easing from my chest. After a while, my father spoke. "How are you holding up?" I exhaled. "It hurts," I said quietly, "but it feels finished." He nodded. Sometimes the hardest part of the past is putting it down. We drove in silence after that, the hum of the engine filling the space between us. When we turned back onto the long gravel driveway leading home, I finally looked over at him. "Thank you for waiting," I said. He smiled faintly. "Always." As the house came into view, warm light glowing through the windows, I felt something shift deep inside me, something that had been locked away for far too long. The anger, the shame, the loneliness, they didn't vanish, but they loosened their grip. When we pulled up in front of the porch, I sat there for a moment, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze. My father turned off the engine and rested his hand on the steering wheel. "You did something brave today," he said quietly. I looked at him, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at my lips. "Maybe it's time I start being brave for myself." He nodded once, proud and quiet. We stepped out of the car, the air crisp and calm around us. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and pink, the kind of evening that made the world feel new again. As we walked toward the porch, I felt the weight of the past settle into something manageable, something I could carry without breaking. And for the first time, I knew the next step wasn't about survival anymore. It was about finally learning how to live. The next morning felt different still, but not heavy. The air carried the clean scent of pine and wood smoke, and for the first time in years, I didn't wake with my stomach clenched. My father was already downstairs, a small stack of letters spread across the kitchen table. A few envelopes sat open, the ink faded, but careful. He looked up as I walked in. "Morning," he said softly. "I was going through some of the older letters. Thought you might want to read them with me." I nodded, sitting beside him. The sunlight poured through the window, catching on the edge of his coffee mug. He handed me one envelope dated the year I turned 12. The handwriting wavered slightly, as if written late at night. "I heard you like to draw," it began. "Maybe someday you'll show me what you've made. I'd hang everyone on my wall." I folded the letter slowly, my throat tight. "I used to draw a lot," I said quietly. Then one day Gerald threw away my sketchbook, said it was a waste of time. My father's hand stilled. He didn't speak for a moment, just exhaled through his nose, steadying himself. "You can draw here," he said finally. "No one will ever take that from you again." We spent the morning sorting through memories I never knew existed, photos, postcards, old newspaper clippings with my father's name in the byline. He'd been a journalist once before everything fell apart. Each piece felt like a small truth returned to me. By midday, Caleb stopped by, knocking lightly on the back door before stepping in. He carried a grocery bag in one hand and that familiar, quiet confidence in his stride. "I brought a few things from town," he said. "Your favorite tea, I think. Your dad wasn't sure which one, so we bought 3. I smiled faintly. "Thank you." He nodded, setting the bag on the counter. "You're settling in all right, I think so," I said. "It still feels strange." "Good, but strange." He gave a small nod. "Strange means new. New's better than what came before." The 3 of us shared lunch at the kitchen table. The conversation was easy, light stories, bits of laughter. My father told Caleb about the time I'd nearly toppled a Christmas tree when I was 2. Hearing him speak about me that way, like he'd been there, was something I hadn't realized I needed. Later that afternoon, Caleb left for town again, and my father suggested a walk through the woods behind the house. The path was narrow, but well-tended, lined with tall pines that whispered in the breeze. "When I bought this land," he said, "I thought I'd build a swing for you out here. I never got the chance." We reached a small clearing where the sunlight pooled through the branches. "You could still build it," I said, my voice soft. He smiled faintly. "Maybe we will." The quiet of the woods settled around us, calm and steady. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You were brave yesterday." "I don't feel brave," I admitted. "Just tired." "That's still courage," he said. "You faced what broke you and didn't let it define you. That's more strength than most people ever find." I let his words sink in the truth of them, quiet but sure. I thought about my mother's face at the doorway, the regret in her eyes. The ache was still there, but it no longer felt like a wound I couldn't touch. When we returned to the house, the sun was dipping low, painting the porch in soft orange light. My father stopped by the steps, looking out toward the gravel road. "You know," he said, "I've thought a lot about what justice means. For years I thought it was about punishment, making someone pay. But I don't think that's it anymore." I turned to him. "Then what is it?" He looked at me, his expression calm. "It's truth," he said. "It's standing up and saying, 'You didn't break me.' That's justice." The words settled deep, quiet, and powerful. I followed him inside the warmth of the house, greeting us again. That evening, as he worked in his study, I found myself drawn back to the wooden box on the table. I opened it, tracing the edges of each envelope, the careful handwriting that had crossed years to reach me. Among them, one stood out, a smaller note tucked at the bottom. The date was recent, only a few weeks old. "If I find her, I will tell her she was never forgotten. I will tell her that love can outlast even silence." The handwriting was my father's. My chest tightened, and I closed the lid gently. Later after dinner, we sat by the fire again. The crackle of wood filled the quiet room, and I felt an ease I hadn't known in a long time. My father leaned back, his gaze on the flames. "You know you could stay here as long as you want," he said. "There's a place for you, always." I looked at him, the warmth of his words sinking deep. "I want to stay," I said simply. He smiled, his eyes glistening in the firelight. Then that settled. As the fire burned lower, I thought about everything that had led here, the rain, the car headlights, the letter in my hands that night. Each moment had pushed me closer to this one. When I finally went upstairs, I paused at the top of the steps and looked back. My father was still sitting there, the firelight flickering across his face. He looked peaceful. In my room, the air was cool and still. I sat on the bed and opened one of my old sketchbooks I'd brought from my bag. The pages were mostly blank, just a few rough lines I'd drawn before leaving home. I picked up a pencil from the nightstand and began to draw. At first it was just the shape of a window, the view from my old house. Then the curve of rain on the glass, the blur of headlights in the distance. Slowly the lines changed. The window opened onto a porch, a man's silhouette framed by warm light arms open. The image took shape until it wasn't just a drawing, it was a memory made whole. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from the quiet relief of being seen. Downstairs, the sound of the fire softened, fading into the night. I set the pencil down, wiped my eyes, and closed the sketchbook. Outside, the wind rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of wood smoke and rain. Somewhere deep inside, I knew I had finally crossed the distance between who I was and who I was becoming. Tomorrow I would wake up not as the girl who had been thrown out, but as the woman who had found her way home. The next few weeks passed quietly, the kind of quiet that feels like healing rather than emptiness. The days grew cooler, and the trees around the house began to turn gold. I fell into a rhythm that felt natural mornings helping my father in the garden afternoons, sketching by the porch evenings filled with the steady hum of conversation and the sound of the fire. Every night when the house settled and the wind whispered through the pines, I found myself thinking back to where this all began. The rain, the plastic bag, the front door that closed behind me, it already felt like another lifetime. One evening I was sitting at the kitchen table when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. For a moment I hesitated before answering. Nora. The voice on the other end was soft, fragile. It was my mother. She didn't say much, just that she had been thinking of me, that the house was too quiet now. She said she understood if I couldn't forgive her, but she wanted me to know she was getting help. She'd started therapy, taken a job back at the clinic, and joined a support group. Her voice shook when she said, "I don't expect anything from you, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to be better." I listened, tears stinging my eyes, and after a long silence I said, "I hope you keep trying. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start." When I hung up, my father was standing in the doorway watching quietly. He didn't ask what she said. He just crossed the room and rested a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. The next morning we drove into town to meet Uncle Mark for lunch. I hadn't seen him since before my birthday, and when he walked into the diner, his face lit up the moment he saw me. "There's my girl," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like home. We talked for hours about work, about the past, about the way family can wound and still find ways to mend. Uncle Mark told me he'd confronted Gerald once years ago, but my mother begged him not to make things worse. "I should have done more," he said, his eyes damp. "I'm sorry, Nora." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You were one of the few people who ever made me feel seen," I told him. "That mattered more than you'll ever know." When we left the diner, the autumn light stretched long across the street, and I realized how different the world looked when it wasn't filtered through fear. Even familiar places felt new again. That weekend, my father and I built the swing he'd promised years ago. The wood smelled fresh, the ropes rough in my hands as we tied the knots. When it was finished, I sat on it, the wind brushing my hair, the sound of the trees surrounding us like quiet applause. He stood beside me, smiling. "Looks like it was always meant to be here," he said. "It was," I replied, pushing gently against the ground. The swing creaked softly, carrying me forward and back, each motion lighter than the last. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I looked at the horizon and thought about all that had happened, the rejection, the storm, the truth that waited on the other side of it. I had been cast out of one home only to find another built on truth, not control. Justice hadn't come in a courtroom or with an apology that fixed everything. It had come in the quiet ways, through the letters that proved I was loved, through the courage to face the past, and through the peace that comes from choosing yourself. That night, as I sat by the fire with my father, I opened my sketchbook and turned to a fresh page. I began to draw the porch light, the glow of it spilling over the steps, the faint outline of two figures, one younger, one older, sharing a silence that said more than words could. When I finished, I closed the book and set it aside. My father looked over and asked softly, "What will you draw next?" I smiled. "I think I'll start with what comes after." He nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. "That's a good place to begin." Outside, the wind carried the scent of pine and the faint rustle of leaves. The storm that had once drowned me now lived only in memory, a reminder of what I'd survived. I realized then that finding peace isn't about erasing the pain. It's about learning to live beyond it. It's about understanding that the people who break you don't get to define what comes next, you do. So if you've ever been cast out, underestimated, or made to feel unworthy, I hope you remember this. Sometimes being pushed out of one door is the only way to find the one that leads you home. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If it touched something in you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And wherever you are tonight, I hope you find your own kind of peace.